The NBA trade deadline is sneaking up on us faster than you think it is, and while the Toronto Raptors have already made some pretty big moves, I think there's still more on the way. What's up, everybody? It's JJ Buckets, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Before I fully get into things, usual drill, just make sure you're leaving a like on the video. You know what's up with that. Like, it obviously helps the video out a ton. I say it every time. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Plus, if you plan on doing any responsible sports betting in the near future, just make sure to check out my link in the description below. So we're going to talk about some of the names left on the Raptors that are candidates to get traded, where they could potentially get traded, and yeah, that's going to be today's video. So let's kick things off with the most obvious one. It's Bruce Brown, right? Like, I think most people, when they saw Bruce Brown included in the Pascal Siakam trade package, it was the same thought all around. He's not going to stick around here for too long. I mean, hell, he's openly advertising the fact that he thinks he would be a good fit on other teams. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I believe it was the Knicks specifically that he was referencing. And quite frankly, that's actually what I'm going to cook up here. So obviously, I'm not going to give you like the exact trade package, the exact details, but I am going to toss out the team where I think that would be a good deal in theory, and maybe somebody that they could get back. So with Bruce Brown and the Knicks, man, I think the rumors have been there, and it's there for the taking, quite frankly. Quentin Grimes, right? Like, that is a guy that you would be thrilled to get back on Toronto, in my opinion. Because with Quentin Grimes, like, I think he is such a quality 3-and-D guy, and I think it's so funny personally to me that I'm sitting here thinking about Grimes on this team, and obviously like him and Scotty had that like little scuffle. I believe it was last season, yeah, where they had the little scuffle where like Scotty gave him that face and he was like, he was not him. Well, I think it would be hilarious to see those guys as teammates, but realistically speaking, I would want to see those guys as teammates because I really look at Grimes and I see him as a player that could fit really well around Barnes. And I think if you have him as the foundational piece for a Bruce Brown trade, that could be good. That could be good. Now, for Bruce Brown in particular, I think of all the names that I'm going to go through here, there's plenty, and I mean plenty, of fits league-wide that you could look at Bruce Brown and be like, yeah, he could fit there, he could fit there. He's one of those guys that you can almost throw on next to any roster and, you know, find a role for him, find a spot for him, especially specifically if we're talking for contenders or teams that are buying. Like, those are teams that could really use a Bruce Brown. So I'm going to toss the Knicks out there, especially because I think it'd be funny to see them hook up for a trade again this season. But if you have a better destination in mind, because of all the trade commodities Toronto has, this is definitely the biggest one, drop it in the comment section. You know the drill. The next name on here, I would also be really surprised if he survives the trade deadline, still a Raptor. It's Chris Boucher. Now, Boucher is a tricky one because on one hand, I kind of seem similar to Bruce Brown to a certain extent where I'm just like, yeah, you could reasonably look at Boucher, add him to like a lot of buying teams, contenders, and find a good role for him. Not as seamlessly as Brown. I think Brown is just, you can plug him almost anywhere and like that guy gets good minutes and has a good role. Boucher's a little trickier. And with Boucher in particular, again, correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, but the only real links that I've seen are to the Boston Celtics. And I look at that Celtics situation and I'm just like, yeah, I can imagine why you would like Chris Boucher on your team in terms of the kind of basketball that they play. I think Boucher would be a really good fit for that squad. But at the same time, I also look at the contracts on the Celtics and I think to myself, I'm like, how does Boston make this work without giving up a piece in their rotation that they actually do like? So again, I guess similar to what I said at the end of the Brown section, if you have an immediate answer for that, obviously drop it in the comment section below. Or if you have another team where you think Boucher is going to end up, same drill. But that's the only link I've seen to this point, so that's the team I'm going to throw out there for this one. But I do think Boucher is probably gone. I believe it was Blake Murphy who was talking about the fact that Chris Boucher probably doesn't survive the deadline. And it's kind of a little bit bittersweet because, while very naturally Pascal Siakam, I think, was the official, you know, start of the new era, him being traded in Raptors basketball, Boucher, for those that don't know, but I'm sure most Raptors fans would, Boucher is technically speaking the last player who's on that Raptors 2019 championship team who's still on the roster. And as soon as he gets traded, that is the nail in the coffin, right? Like, Pascal was obviously the big signifier that's like, yeah, we're in a new era of Raptors basketball. Him being traded naturally is what I mean. But yeah, Boucher is just the nail in the coffin to that one, that like, yep, no, we've officially moved past that. Now, these next two are maybe a little less obvious, but ones that I still think are going to come up in terms of names before the deadline who may be dealt. Gary Trent Jr. Do the Raptors envision Gary Trent Jr. as a part of their future? Because we know his contract is up at the end of the season. We know he's due for a new one. What does he think he's worth? And do the Raptors agree that he's going to be worth that much money? Because quite frankly, I think that's where the trade talks would either kickstart or obviously not kickstart. Because if the Raptors feel like they can bring back Gary Trent Jr. on an affordable contract, I don't see that much reason to ship him out. Like, he's a good floor spacer, a little streaky sometimes, but a lot of shooters are. He's a good floor spacer, decent defender. You know, there's better 3-and-D guys out there, but there's also a lot worse 3-and-D guys out there than Gary Trent Jr. So he's not a bad player to move forward with if you're Toronto. But at the same time, if you feel like he's going to ask for a contract in the offseason that you're just not willing to offer him, right? Like, the deadline's right there. You can probably get a young asset or maybe some picks from a contender that's looking to add shooting. So why not kick the tires on a trade? I'm sure they will kick the tires on a trade to some extent and then go from there. Now, with Gary, it's a little maybe trickier to find a fit for him. I think a team like the Lakers has made sense for a very long time, but, you know, would the Lakers be interested in a swap like Gary Trent Jr. for like a Rui Hachimura, which Rui Hachimura might be included in like a DeJounte Murray package for the Lakers if that's gonna go down. Obviously, I'm sure you've seen the rumors of DeJounte Murray coming to LA. Like, those have been big over the past few weeks, but yeah, like there are teams that I think Gary Trent Jr. makes sense on in terms of buying teams. Hell, I could even think of like a team like the Mavericks. Gary Trent Jr. would make a decent amount of sense there in terms of just being a floor spacer and an offense for Luka and for Kyrie Irving, you know, who are gonna attack the basket and gonna want somebody as an outlet guy to kick out to when they draw their defenders in. Actually, yeah, the more I talk about that one, I really like the idea of Gary Trent Jr. beside Luka. That being said, Gary Trent Jr., I think it's a little more iffy whether or not he gets traded. I really do think it depends on kind of where the Raptors and Gary and his agents sit in terms of the price points of his next contract, and that'll be the biggest indicator in terms of whether or not Gary Trent Jr. is here past the deadline. Now, the last name I'll toss out here is, funny enough, a pretty recent arrival to Toronto, but the marriage could split up pretty quickly. Dennis Schroeder. While I do think Dennis Schroeder has been okay with Toronto, and in particular since his move to the bench, he's actually been a lot better than he has been as a starter for the Raptors. I also wouldn't be surprised if Dennis Schroeder is a guy that teams come calling about before the deadline, because Schroeder is a good option to lead your second unit off the bench. He's a good secondary scoring punch. He's a good playmaker. And when he wants to be, he can be a good defender. He hasn't really been a great one for Toronto, but like we've seen in the past with LA, he was fine. He was solid. He wasn't elite by any means, but he was solid. And funny enough, I think if anybody's gonna come calling, I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers come calling again for Dennis Schroeder, excuse me. And I think Dennis Schroeder is an interesting one to me, because while I do think there's a chance he gets moved, and I think with Schroeder and with Trent, I have somewhat of an interesting thought process of it, where it's just like, I think part of the motivation of why you could be moving those guys is to open up minutes. Naturally, at this point, you've embraced that you're rebuilding. You've embraced, I wouldn't quite call it tanking, because I don't think the Raptors are going to go like full out tank, but you've definitely at least embraced the rebuild. And while Dennis Schroeder is a fine player, you know, why not move him somewhere else and clear some minutes up for, you know, potentially a Kira Lewis and see what he can do with the Raptors unit, see if you got anything there in him. And I guess similar thought process for Gary as well, if you want to free up minutes for Grady Dick, for example. That one I don't think is as pressing, like I think you can have both of those guys, and that's not a problem. But with Dennis Schroeder, I think a little bit more so. That is the thought process of like, yeah, move off Schroeder, get a young guard like Lewis some minutes. Hell, maybe even bring up Freeman Liberty. He's had some good games with the 905, so like, see what he looks like, you know, running with the top unit in the, obviously not the top unit, the starting unit, running with the NBA players. Sorry, you can clearly tell I'm near the end of the video. Regardless, you get the idea of why you would make a trade involving Dennis Schroeder. I think the fit league-wide in terms of where Schroeder would go is a little more tricky. Again, the Lakers, I hate to bring them up for, you know, a second trade candidate in a row, but it does make a decent amount of sense. Schroeder's time with Toronto might just look like that Abe Simpson meme where walks in, walks right back out. And that pretty much does it for me. What do you folks think? Do you think I'm missing anybody obvious that you expect to get dealt or you could really see getting dealt? I decided to leave Thad Young off the list because I think Thad Young is a quality veteran that you really like having in your locker room. If you listen to him in the post-game press conferences, he says all the right stuff from a vet that you would want on your team. So I really don't envision him getting traded, although I wouldn't rule it out entirely. But yeah, if there's anybody I missed, feel free to let me know by all means. Besides for that, folks, I'm pretty much done for this video. Yeah, usual drill, same as at the beginning of the video. If you're still here, like the video, it goes a long way. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Other than that, it's been JJ Buckets. It's been a pleasure, and I will see everybody next time.